All right. So let's get started with Descartes' meditations then. Um, Descartes, as we saw in the introduction, or as I was trying to explain in the introduction, Descartes is thrown into a world of great uncertainty, a period of skepticism about everything that has been called truth and science. So Descartes begins, first line of his meditations. Some years ago, I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole edifice that I had subsequently based on them. Right? In another work, Discourse on Method, which is a kind of trial run for the meditations, Descartes goes into more detail about these falsehoods that he believed as a child. And what he has in mind here is everything that he learned in school and all of the quote unquote received ideas that were passed on to him by his elders, his parents, his teachers, the whole medieval world. So he is thinking about these falsehoods that he accepted, and I think we should, above all, here think about Aristotelian physics, right, and the whole edifice of ideas that are built on that Aristotelian physics, the system of ethics, system of politics, this whole philosophical web that gets sort of overturned or broken down by Copernicus. So, what Descartes is identifying here is the way that essentially a whole worldview ideology gets built on certain essential facts and ideas. And when one of those essential ideas is falsified, the entire worldview has to be dismantled, examined, taken apart, right? And so this is what Descartes is setting out to do, recognizing that one of these or many of these crucial essential ideas are wrong. He wants to dismantle his worldview. Right? He goes on in this first paragraph. I will devote myself sincerely and without reservation to the general demolition of my opinions. Right? In breaking down this worldview, in dismantling this edifice built on falsehoods, Descartes is seeking a new ground, right? A new foundational truth on which to build a more accurate worldview. Right? He's looking explicitly for a new worldview, a new edifice of science, and in the same way that the medieval world and medieval mind is has this edifice constructed around certain essential ideas. Descartes is trying to build an entirely new world. Right? If we come up with a new scientific system, which is one of Descartes' main goals here, we would erect a new edifice around that science, right? A new ethics, a new politics, a new metaphysics. So that's what he's up to. So the general demolition of his opinions, right? What he's looking for is anything that is going to be absolutely true, indubitable. Are there any ideas that he has? Are there any opinions that cannot be falsified? So what he sets out on then is this demolition of his opinions. And this project, the project of dismantling this edifice, is referred to as the project of radical doubt. He goes on, the second paragraph, right? And I'll refer to the universal pagination in the margins. It's page 18. But to accomplish this, it will not be necessary for me to show that all my opinions are false, which is something I could perhaps never manage. Reason now leads me to think that I should hold back my assent from opinions which are not completely certain and indubitable, just as carefully as I do from those which are patently false. So, in order to, right, demolish all falsehoods in his mind, right, to rid himself of any false ideas, he is here setting a standard, right, setting his criteria. And he says, it's not enough just to demolish those ideas that are patently false, right? Those things that are demonstrably wrong. I have to also, get rid of any idea that could be wrong, that is not completely certain and indubitable, right? Is there any idea that is indubitable, that cannot be doubted? This will be the foundation for a science, foundation for a new worldview, right? Something that cannot be doubted. And I think we have to think about, again, the social and historical context here. Not that it's the most determining motivation in Descartes' project, but I think it's important to bear in mind, right? Why is doubt the key term here, right? Why is doubt so central? And it is absolutely central to Descartes' project. Why is the goal to find something that cannot be doubted? Well, because, right, in a time of division, in a time of schism and plurality of opinions, what you need to persuade the different sects, the different divisions, is that indubitable truth. Right? If it can be doubted, it will be doubted for, right, polemical and social reasons, if not for genuine philosophical reasons. So indubitability has the incredibly important virtue of necessarily being acceptable to all people, regardless of their what sort of faction they belong to. Right? Do they align with the new Copernican science, or are they sticking to the Aristotelian science? Are they Catholics? Are they Protestants? Right? We need something that is indubitable, which will appeal to all people, right? And appeal to Descartes, right? Satisfying his own desire for truth. But so, what might this indubitable truth be, right? The most dubious, the most doubtful ideas will be those that are speculative, right? Those that are not demonstrable, that is to say, ideas for which evidence cannot be provided in the physical world. So he goes on. Whatever I have up till now accepted as most true, I have acquired either from the senses or through the senses. So in looking for what is indubitable, we would likely first turn to that which we know through our senses, empirical knowledge, right? Empirical knowledge is knowledge gained through experience. Empiricism refers to experience, and we have experience through our five senses, right? So what do I know most certainly? That this book exists, right? I can feel it, I can touch it. When I rap on it, I feel it against my knuckles. I see it. What could be more indubitable than the fact that this book exists, right? However, he says, he goes on, but from time to time, I have found that the senses deceive, and it is prudent never to trust completely those who have deceived us even once. All right, so Now Descartes is pointing out, right? Remember, his one of his criterion is uh, I want to trust only that which is indubitable, which cannot be doubted. Now, uh, when I trust my senses, I am trusting uh, something that does on occasion deceive me. And Descartes is using something like legal logic here, in the sense that, you could think of your senses as a witness. Right? Your senses report what is happening. Now, on the stand in a trial, a witness that has a history of deceit is going to be judged a less reliable witness than one without a history of deceit. And so, Descartes is here putting his senses on the stand, on trial, and is recognizing that his senses have a history of deceit and therefore may not be the most reliable witness, right? My senses deceive me. I see heat on a road that appears to be glimmering like a pool, right? I see a pool. I see water. When I go up and look closer, I recognize that it's a mirage, right? My senses have deceived me. When I look at a bear in the distance, it appears small, but when I get up close, it is much larger than I am, right? My senses have deceived me about the size of a bear. When I put an oar in water, right? When I'm rowing my my rowboat, the oar bends as it goes into the water. When I pull it out again, it's straight. Right? My senses deceive me. The oar appears bent. We'll see another example of the difficulty of relying on your senses, a more in-depth example in a moment. But for now, it's enough to recognize that because your senses sometimes deceive you, the information that we get from our senses can't be wholly trusted. Right? So, what Descartes is asserting here is that we can't even believe, we can't accept as absolutely true the things that we experience with our own senses. I can't be sure that I am, in fact, sitting on a chair in my study. Right? As we'll see in a moment, I can't even be sure that I have a body. Right? What Descartes is setting up here is one of the most important problems in modern philosophy, which is the mind-body problem. Right? If I can't trust my senses, then there is a disconnect between my mind and my body, what my body experiences. Uh, a disconnect, moreover, between my mind and the external world, the physical world, which I only have knowledge of through my senses. And if I can't trust the information that my senses give me, I can't be sure, indubitably, that there is an external world that exists. I can't be sure that there is a physical world. Right? So Descartes recognizes that he is approaching a crazy position. Right? I can't trust my senses. I can't trust that there's an external world. He goes on at the start of page 19 in the Universal Pagination. Again, how could it be denied that these hands or this whole body are mine? It says, unless perhaps I were to liken myself to madmen, whose brains are so damaged by the persistent vapors of melancholia that they firmly maintain they are kings when they are paupers, or say that they are dressed in purple when they are naked, or that their heads are made of earthenware, or that they are pumpkins or made of glass. Right? Um, so this then begins a series of arguments that Descartes makes for why it is, in fact, philosophically necessary to doubt the existence of the external world, to doubt the information that we get from our senses. right? And the first of these arguments is the argument, as they say, from madness. Uh, it seems crazy, Descartes recognizes, to doubt the information that we get from our senses, to doubt the external world, to doubt that I have a body. Right? How can I doubt that these are my hands? Right? This is my body. Well, Descartes says it is entirely possible to live with a false impression, right? To think and reason and judge, uh, such as it is, right? With the belief that your body is something other than it is, right? You might believe, for example, that your body is a pumpkin, that your body is made of glass. You might believe that you're wearing purple when you're naked, right? People believe this all the time. They operate with false beliefs. They believe, you know, right? I believe my body is the body that it is. But a mad person believes their body is a pumpkin or made of glass, right? King Charles the Fifth, could be the fourth or the sixth of France, the Mad King, on whom the Mad King in Game of Thrones was based, if you're into that, believed that his body was made of glass. This is right a real thing that happens. Um, so if a mad person can believe that their body is actually made of glass, how do I know that I'm not equally mad, also mad, for believing my body is made of flesh and bone? What's the difference between me and a mad person? How do I know that I'm not mad? Uh, this is. I used to think about this when I was younger. Um, you know, how do I know that this is not all an elaborate operation set up by my caretakers? That I'm not, stark raving mad, mentally ill in some way, and that this is an insane asylum. My parents are, in fact, my doctors, and all of you are actors being paid to humor me, right? Make me feel comfortable and at home. It's easier to believe now than ever, right? As I sit alone in a room and talk into a computer, believing that there's a class of students out there listening and taking notes, right? Completely insane. Um, but the point is, right? You don't know. You don't know if you're mad. And interestingly, Descartes does not resolve this problem. There's a famous debate in the 1960s between Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault, two French philosophers, about whether or not Descartes ever resolves the problem of madness. And Derrida makes an argument, which I think is convincing, that Descartes never really resolves this problem. We can never really be sure that we aren't mad. And indeed, right, he moves on quickly from this point, right? A brilliant piece of reasoning at the end of this paragraph. But such people are insane, and I would be thought equally mad if I took anything from them as a model for myself. Right? So obviously, they're crazy, and I'm not. Right? A brilliant piece of reasoning, as he rightly sort of mocks himself here. So that problem is unresolved. We can sort of make a common sense move here and say, yeah, it is in a practical way easy to discern between the mad and the sane. And the obvious way to do that would be, well, there's a general consensus that our bodies are flesh and bone, and it's an outlier opinion to believe that our body is made of glass, right? And so, by virtue of being an outlier, we say that's mad, and the consensus is sane. Shouldn't be good enough for Descartes, right? And it's not really, but he moves on. Right? We don't need to dwell on the madness example, because here's a more relatable example. He says, "As if I were not a man who sleeps at night, and regularly has all the same experiences while asleep as madmen do when awake. Indeed, sometimes even more improbable ones. This is the second argument, right? The argument from dreams, right? And similarly, the argument will be uh, just like the mad person believes crazy things about the physical world, so does the dreamer. And everyone dreams. When I am dreaming, moreover, I believe that the dream is real, right? What I experience in a dream, I experience in the same way that I experience reality. If I'm dreaming on that I am on a Caribbean island drinking a pina colada and watching the waves, right? I have all the sensory experiences that I would have as if I were actually there. And I can taste the pina colada. I can smell the suntan lotion. I feel the warmth. I see the ocean. I can even feel the sand running through my fingers, right? Everything about the ocean, the sand, the beach is real as reality is to me right now. And I, in the dream, believe in that reality. I have absolute and total faith and belief that I am where I believe I am. So, how do I know that this isn't a dream? Right? How do I know that waking life is not a dream? How do I know the difference between a dream and reality? Uh, it's entirely possible, Descartes is suggesting, that this world, just like the dream, is entirely invented, a product of my imagination. None of this is actually happening. Right? My mind can produce a reality. It does so every night in dreams. So how do I know that this reality is not produced by my mind? Uh, Now, there are, he says, certain things in dreams that I'm unable to change. In dreams, there is some consistency that appears to not be a product of my own mind, that I seem to be incapable of changing. And he thinks maybe those things which are uh, the same and unchangeable in dreams and in reality might constitute this deeper reality, an independent that would be a reality that would be independent of my mind. He says, it must at least be admitted that certain other, even simpler and more universal things are real. These are, as it were, the real colors from which we form all the images of things, whether true or false, that occur in our thought. Right, this class appears to include corporeal nature in general and its extension, the shape of extended things, the quantity or size and number of these things, the place in which they may exist, the time through which they may endure, and so on. uh, so even in dreams, I'm not capable, for example, of creating new colors. Even in dreams, I have to imagine certain bodies. I have to imagine things happening in space, in time. Everything has to have a quantity, size, a number, right? Uh, so there are components of reality that are consistent from waking life and dream life. And those components seem to constitute what might be a universal reality, an indubitable reality, right? Not particular states of affairs. I'm in this room. My shirt is blue. But the quality of blueness itself, the corporeal nature of a shirt, that a shirt has extension, meaning takes up space. Right? These things are perhaps necessary, absolute, indubitable, right? The oneness of a body. So he goes on. So a reasonable conclusion from this might be that physics, astronomy, medicine, and all other disciplines which depend on the study of composite things are doubtful, right? So physics, astronomy, medicine, things which depend on composite things, right? Uh, right? Composite things, meaning states of affairs or systems, right? Uh, those are all doubtful. They are potentially, right, products of my mind. While arithmetic, geometry, and other subjects of this kind, which deal only with the simplest and most general things, regardless of whether they really exist in nature or not, contain something real and indubitable. And so, uh, simple things, non-composites, mathematics, right, arithmetic, geometry, uh, contain something certain and indubitable. In dreams and in waking life, mathematics is the same. For whether I am awake or asleep, 2 and 3 added together are 5, and a square has no more than 4 sides. Right? No matter how outrageous or improbable my dream might be, I can't make it true that a square has the same number of sides as a triangle. I can't make it true that a right triangle, uh, the angles of a right triangle don't add up to 180 degrees. Um, I can't make it true that 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. Mathematics seems to be this universal truth. This is where Descartes goes the extra mile in his project of radical doubt, right? Because this could be his foundation, right? Uh, Mathematics, the foundation for a new world, the foundation for a new science, uh, and a new scientific method. However, it's interesting that he doesn't stop here, right? That he continues. Uh, Now, why would he continue? For one thing, um, if all we have is mathematics, if that's all that we can be certain of, we can't be certain of any systems, we can't be certain of any composite things, then I can't really build very much on this, right? I can't be certain of the existence of my body, right? I can be certain that the color blue exists, but I can't be certain that my shirt is blue, that my shirt is on my body, that this collection of organs and limbs is, in fact, a body, etc. Right? I can't build anything on this. Mathematics on its own remains interestingly abstract. We need something more. But also, I think legitimately, Descartes thinks um, I don't feel that mathematical truths, just because there's consistency between waking life and dreaming life, are absolutely indubitable. I can find a way to doubt them. And this is his next move, his final argument in the project of radical doubt, which is the argument from uh, the evil genius, right? What is commonly referred to as the evil genius. And he begins this by saying, and yet firmly rooted in my mind, this is on page 21, the universal pages, and yet firmly rooted in my mind is the long-standing belief that there is an omnipotent God who made me the kind of creature that I am. How do I know that he has not brought it about, that there is no earth, no sky, no extended thing, no shape, no size, no place, while at the same time ensuring that all these things appear to me to exist just as they do now? Okay, so uh, Descartes says, yes, mathematics. However, I have this other idea, and it's an idea of an all-powerful being. this is where things start to get a little complicated, right? Because he says, I have this idea of an all-powerful being. Why doesn't he doubt this idea? Right? Why has he not already thrown this idea out? Well, to begin with, and he goes into much more depth on this in the other text that I mentioned, Discourse on Method. Uh, to begin with, right, this is the 17th century. It's not really acceptable to begin a philosophical work by throwing out the idea of God or declaring one's skepticism about the belief in God. But let's operate with the principle of generosity and assume that Descartes, in good faith, has other reasons besides social alienation or fear of exile or execution. He did end up having to move to Holland for fear of persecution. The idea of God makes it possible to doubt mathematics. Now, perhaps the reason not to doubt God is precisely for this, right? That if we don't yet know whether mathematics is absolutely true or God's existence is absolutely true, if God's existence could call mathematics into question, then we shouldn't, out of hand, assume that mathematics is true and God is not. So, and this is what Descartes is arguing, right? If God really is all powerful, omnipotent, omnipotent, then absolutely it would be true that God could deceive me about the nature of mathematics. Right? It could be true that 2 plus 2 equals 5 in reality. But God has deceived me my entire life and everyone in the world into believing that 2 plus 2 is 4. Now, what would reality mean in this case? It would mean something independent of me, which I don't have access to, but which God has access to, and which God has blocked my access to. Now, what prevents God from doing this? Why would God not do this? Only because God is, in addition to omnipotent and omniscient, also definitionally understood to be benevolent. Right? God is good. God is not a deceiver, right? And therefore, God would not deceive us. And this is where Descartes gets himself into really dangerous water. And he says, all right, for the purposes of argument, let's assume, let's have a little thought experiment. Right? Let's imagine that God is, in fact, not good, but is a deceiver. Let's imagine, instead of God, an evil demon. Right? On page 22, at the very bottom, going on to page 23, he writes, I will suppose, therefore, that not God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely the delusions of dreams which he has devised to ensnare my judgment. I shall stubbornly and firmly persist in this meditation, and even if it is not in my power to know any truth, I shall at least do what is in my power, that is, resolutely guard against assenting to any falsehoods, so that the deceiver, however powerful and cunning he may be, will be unable to impose on me in the slightest degree. So, in place of God, I now imagine an evil deceiver. And I believe that this deceiver is deceiving me about everything that I experience, including mathematical and scientific truths. Descartes says, I must persist in my project. Right? What am I going to do? What does it mean? It means that I will withhold my assent from any idea which is not indubitably true. Right? So, what we have here is Descartes. Uh, well, let's pause on this evil deceiver for a minute. This is the Matrix, right? The Matrix is a fine movie. It's a good movie. It's and it's now sort of a philosophy stock meme, but it's useful for thinking about this, right? How could it be possible that my entire experience is false? Right? My entire world is false. Perhaps it's easier for us to imagine that our brains are hooked up to a supercomputer, and the supercomputer is uh, feeding us all this information, right? The entire world is actually a program built by superintelligence and fed into our brains, like in the Matrix. If you haven't seen the Matrix, check it out, right? You end up basically a brain in a vat connected to input tubes that are simulating a reality. How do I know reality is not a simulation? And this is a real theory that serious physicists and thinkers have put forward, right? That it's conceivable, in fact, probable, that we are living in a computer simulation. Right? That in fact, none of this is real. There's an interesting paper by, I believe it's by Thomas Nagel, but I'm going to check that right now. That suggests that we are actually brains in a vat, right? How would we know that we aren't brains in a vat? Forgive me. Okay, forget it. All right, that's the question. And Descartes is going to attempt to argue his way out of this. Okay, so our matrix analogy, but what's really more important at the end here is that line I read, right? I shall stubbornly and firmly persist in this meditation, and even if it is not in my power to know any truth, I shall at least do what is in my power, resolutely guard against assenting to any falsehoods. Descartes is able to separate himself from all of these deceptions. Everything is deception. Everything is falsehood. And I am able to deny the world. I'm able to reject everything I think and experience. I am able to live with all truth suspended, it would seem. I'm able to resist this omnipotent, omniscient power that has trained all of its power on deceiving me. That is an incredible assertion of power. Right? What is in my power? To guard against assenting, to guard against assenting, to withhold assent, to assert my independence. Right? Even in the face of this evil deceiver, I'm able to assert my independence. All right, now that's the end of the first meditation. In the beginning of the second meditation begins in this state, right, where Descartes is believing that the entire world is produced by this evil deceiver. So serious are the doubts into which I have been thrown as a result of yesterday's meditation that I can neither put them out of my mind nor see any way of resolving them. It feels as if I have fallen unexpectedly into a deep whirlpool, which tumbles me around so that I can neither stand on the bottom nor swim up to the top. Right? Descartes is experiencing a moment of nihilism, and a belief in nothing, that nothing is true. uh, what does this mean? What is nihilism? This is a very important moment in the history of philosophy. Right? This is also a foundational moment in modern philosophy, uh, which is that in at the core of Descartes' project, uh, at the sort of nadir, bottom point of this project of radical doubt, Descartes hits up against nihilism, right? The belief in nothing, the belief that nothing is true and nothing is real. Uh, this is a sort of problem that philosophy will grapple with and which will return over and over again in philosophy uh, forever after Descartes. He goes on. Anything which admits of the slightest doubt I will set aside just as if I had found it to be wholly false. And I will proceed in this way until I recognize something certain, or, if nothing else, until I at least recognize for certain that there is no certainty. Right? Now, this is interesting. Right? He says, I'm going to push on until, if nothing else, I can be sure that nothing is certain. It would be possible to conclude this project with the realization that the only true thing is that nothing is true. Right? The only truth is that there is no truth. Now, this is not a truth, right? This is the sort of nihilist's paradox. Right? If the only thing that's true is that nothing is true, well, then, right, it's not true that nothing is true. Something is true, but the thing that's true is that nothing is true, so that can't be true. And this is an endless loop. It's a paradox, right? And a paradox has no truth value. Right? You can't build anything on a paradox. You can't ground anything on a paradox. And so this is what truth is, right? What is truth? What is an indubitable truth? It is something that grounds something, something that is stable, something that doesn't move, that doesn't change. A paradox is a constantly changing, self-canceling thing. Truth can't be that way. Truth has to be self-affirming, not self-canceling. That's an incredibly important distinction, a kind of definition of truth here. And it's that definition of truth that is going to become so important for Descartes. Truth is self-affirming, not self-denying, self-canceling. And this speaks to this image of the whirlpool also. In his nihilism, he's lost, fallen unexpectedly into a deep whirlpool. Now can neither stand on the bottom nor swim to the top. There is no orientation. There is no ground. There is no top. There are no set relations. Right? You need a stable, self-affirming truth to act as a ground on which to build, and on which to build an edifice, a worldview, a system of truth, a scientific system. And to hammer this home more, he says, Archimedes used to demand just one firm and immovable point in order to shift the entire earth. So I, too, can hope for great things if I can manage to find just one thing, however slight, that is certain and unshakable. Right? An Archimedean point Descartes is seeking. Right? An Archimedean point on which to build the rest of his edifice. He goes on. I will suppose then that everything I see is spurious. I will believe that my memory tells me lies, and that none of the things that it reports ever happened. I have no senses. Body, shape, extension, movement, and place are chimeras. So what remains true? Perhaps just the one fact that nothing is certain. Yet apart from everything I have just listed, how do I know that there is not something else which does not allow even the slightest occasion for doubt? Is there not a God, or whatever I may call him, who puts into me the thoughts I am now having? But why do I think this, since I myself may perhaps be the author of these thoughts? In that case, am I not at least something? But I've just said that I have no senses and no body. This is the sticking point. What follows from this? Right? Okay, I have no senses. I have no body. But I'm thinking. And if I'm thinking, then that thinking must have come from someplace. Can I doubt that I'm thinking? Where do these thoughts come from? Does God give them to me? Or am I the author of these thoughts? So, even without a body, even disbelieving my sense, I'm thinking. I can't deny that. But what is this thinking? So he says, does it not follow that I too do not exist? I've convinced myself there's absolutely nothing in the world. No sky, no earth, no bodies, no minds. Does it not now follow that I too do not exist? No. If I convince myself of something, then I certainly existed. Right? I've convinced myself of something. I have, right, insisted on rejecting all of these falsehoods. I have stood up to this all-powerful evil demon. In that case, I too undoubtedly exist. Right? There is a deceiver of some supreme power and cunning who is deliberately and constantly deceiving me. But in that case, I too undoubtedly exist if he is deceiving me. The fact that I am being deceived means that I exist. If I am deceived, I exist. And let him deceive me as much as he can. He will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I think that I am something. So after considering everything very thoroughly, I must finally conclude that this proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived in my mind. So what Descartes has just formulated is the first articulation of his most famous philosophical idea, right, which is the cogito, the cogito ergo sum, the I think, therefore I am, right? I think, therefore I am. And in the second meditation, Descartes gives several articulations to this idea. And in this first one, he simply says, I am, I exist. Right? Because I am doubting, right? Because I am being deceived, I know that I am and I exist. Right? And this is necessarily, absolutely true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived in my mind. Right? So, I think, therefore I am means that I am certain of my existence. It is indubitably true that I exist. Even if everything else is deception and false, I exist as something being deceived and as something that has false ideas. Right? And that is an indubitable truth. The foundation for reality, the foundation for truth, the foundation for being is the indubitable certainty that I exist, that I am. Right? So if this is the foundation of the modern world, of modern philosophy, that foundation is found in this relationship between myself and the external world and all knowledge and information. And I am only certain of myself. The foundation for everything else is self-certainty. And any further truth that I might be able to know will be grounded in my certainty of my own existence. However, being certain that I exist is very different from knowing what I am. So remember, this begins with this acknowledgement that thinking exists. And that thinking already is ambiguous. Does the thinking belong to God, or does the thinking belong to me? Why does Descartes assert that it's him, that this thinking proves that I am? This is another major point of debate in Descartes scholarship, right? This transition from there is thinking to I think. The fact of doubting, which is indubitable, right? I doubt that this book is actually real, even though it's in my hand. I doubt that it exists. That doubt is a thought, right? Where that thought comes from, the source of that thought, is still mysterious. That the thought exists is indubitable. It is self-affirming, right? The thinking affirms itself. By thinking, thinking affirms its own existence. Thinking cannot be denied. The existence of thought cannot be denied. But why does that thinking prove that Descartes, as an individual I, exists? As I said, there's a lot of debate about this, but I think we can already see the foundation for that argument and the reason to attribute that thinking to an I in the last moment of the first meditation, right? The I, the thinking, is an act of will. It is the withholding of assent. It is a holding back. And that holding back is a kind of reservation, a reserve. And that reserve implies a kind of individuation, kind of I. Insofar as the reserve is a kind of privation. There's a private withholding of assent in the thinking. Right? The thinking appears to be attached to an individuated will, and that will seems to be identical to the thinking, and that will is really what the I is. Right? That's the great insight. So Descartes goes on. Right? I do not yet have sufficient understanding of what this I is that now necessarily exists. So I must be on my guard against carelessly taking something else to be this I, and so making a mistake in the very item of knowledge that I maintain is the most certain and evident of all. What then did I formerly think I was? A man. Right? But what is a man? Shall I say a rational animal? No, for then I should have to inquire what an animal is, what rationality is, and in this way, one question would lead me down the slope to other harder ones. I do not now have the time to waste on subtleties like this. Okay, so Descartes is saying, right, I don't know what I am. uh, I'm tempted to say I'm a man, but I don't know what a man is. I'm tempted to say I'm a rational animal, right? And this is an important moment, right? A rational animal. This is the Aristotelian definition of a human being. What am I? I'm a rational animal. What is the human being? A rational animal. Aristotle's zoon, logon, eshon, right? Uh, the animal that has speech is a better translation of the Greek. Uh, but this is an ancient definition of the human being. And by tossing this definition out, right, by saying, no, I'm not a rational animal, not without further ado, we have to uh, right, re-examine this definition. By doing this, Descartes is explicitly uh, right, throwing away or calling into question the Aristotelian tradition. I don't know what I am. And it is not immediately evident that I'm a rational animal. Um, my essence does not appear to, to be defined as a rational animal. And he goes on to say, I can neither um, say that I'm a thing that perceives, nor do I know that I have a soul. Right? All these things are caught up in the world, right? Caught up in uh, systems of philosophy. For now, all I know is that there is thinking, and that thinking uh, issues from me and I. He goes on, this is page 27. Uh, Forgive me. At last, I have discovered it. Thought. This alone is inseparable from me. I am, I exist. That is certain. Right? So, thought, thinking, right, is all that I am. But for how long? For as long as I am thinking. For it could be that were I totally to cease from thinking, I should totally cease to exist. At present, I am not admitting anything except what is necessarily true. I am then, in the strict sense, only a thing that thinks. That is, I am a mind, or intelligence, or intellect, or reason, words whose meaning I have been ignorant of until now. But for all that, I am a thing which is real and which truly exists. But what kind of a thing? As I have just said, a thinking thing. So what am I that exists? A thinking thing. Right? Human being is a thinking thing. Our necessary existence, what we essentially are, is a thinking thing. We are minds. So, right, just to make one more comment about this, it's often sort of thought that the cogito, and I'll be referring to this Cartesian idea, I think, therefore I am, as the cogito. It's the shorthand for referring to that idea based on the Latin cogito, I think, ergo, therefore, sum, I am. The cogito is often thought to mean something along the lines of, unless you're thinking philosophically, right? Unless you're having deep philosophical thoughts, you aren't living up to your potential, right? You aren't really being. You aren't being all that you can be. Something along the lines of an unexamined life isn't worth living, right? Not at all. Right? The cogito, I think, therefore I am, is meant by Descartes to be scientific proof of being, scientific proof of existence. And this is very important, very interesting. Right? The foundation for scientific truth is not empirical, it is logical. Right? What we need in order to have a foundation for truth is not observation, but a logical truth, a self-affirming truth, right? I think, therefore I am. That is the first necessary and absolute truth in a system of truth. Uh, all right. But having that truth, we can now start to build on that, right? What am I? What is a thinking thing, right? I'm a thinking thing. What does this mean? uh, so, a thinking thing, and it's interesting, he says, right? But for how long? For as long as I'm thinking. Now, what is implied here, right, is that when I'm not thinking, I don't exist. I can't be sure that I exist. I don't know that I exist. Uh, Fascinating. But what is thinking? Right? On page 28, he goes on. What then am I? A thing that thinks. What is that? A thing that doubts, understands, affirms, denies, is willing, is unwilling, and also imagines and has sensory perceptions. So these are the acts of thinking that belong to a thinking thing. Right? I doubt, I understand, I affirm, I deny, I will, or I'm unwilling. I also imagine and have sensory perceptions. These are all parts of thought. Thinking things do all these things. So, we're going to consider all those different forms of thinking. Now, we're running out of time, but I'm going to try and do this quickly. The final, uh, no, we're going to put this off until next class. So, what we've covered today is the project of radical doubt, the demolition of Descartes' opinions, and the three arguments against the existence of the external world and reasons to doubt all truth. Right? The argument from madness, the argument from dreaming, and the argument from the evil genius. We saw Descartes' brush with nihilism, the possibility that the only thing that's true is that nothing is true, and his escape from nihilism, which is the cogito. I think, therefore I am. Right? The fact that I'm thinking means that I exist, and it is indubitable. It cannot be doubted. Whenever I doubt that I'm thinking, I am once again thinking and have yet again proved my existence. All right. So for the next video, we will finish up the second meditation, and we will begin on the third meditation. Until then.